Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's Head and Neck Weekly webinar. As you all know, we've been having regular webinars bi-weekly on Thursdays and Saturdays, and we are into our 18th session today. We've begun with our second module on cancer of the oral cavity, but if any of you would like to have a look at our previous videos, they are available on our YouTube channel, AHNOK Webinar. So this module on the oral cavity has seen some exemplary speakers like Dr. Ashok Shaha himself, Dr. Devendra Chokka, Dr. Abhishek Vaidya, Dr. Arya, Dr. Moni Kuryakose, and Dr. Deepak Nair. And similarly, today we have Dr. Vikram Kekatpure joining us from SiteCare Hospital to speak on a very complex topic indeed. So we will get into that a little later. But I must mention that this has only been possible due to the collaboration with our academic partners, that is HCG Academics, as well as AHNOK, which is our Academia of Head and Neck Oncology of Karnataka. So if any of you would like to join this academia, any budding head neck surgeons or practicing head neck surgeons, you can please write to info@ahnok.com and they will get back to you with the details. So these are the various topics that have been lined up for the rest of the month. Please join us. The dates may vary a little bit, but we'll keep you updated. So to introduce today's speakers and moderator, I will be introducing today's moderator, Dr. L.M. Kumaran. Dr. L.M. Kumaran was one of the first fellows in oral oncosurgery to pass out of Kidwai. He is my senior, and he completed his fellowship in the year 2012. And after that, he also obtained the IFNOS Golf Fellowship from IFNOS, and he's currently practicing as a consultant and as an associate professor in Sri Ramchandra Institute of Higher Education and Research. So welcome, sir. I hand over the session to you now to introduce our speaker for the day and to conduct the session. Thank you for joining us.
So thank you, Shalini. So good evening, everybody. So the speaker for today is Dr. Vikram Kekatpure. So sir is a senior consultant and is heading the department at SiteCare Hospital, Bangalore. And sir has got a vast experience of around 14 years in both teaching and research, as well as in clinical cases. Sir is a member of all national and international scientific societies like FHNO, Indian Association of Cancer Research, and American Association. Apart from that, if you would like to introduce sir in my own words, I would say during my fellowship training, I used to travel from Kidwai to Narayana along with my colleague because that time I was passionate in resection. But I used to ask my colleague if there is any reconstruction at Narayana. I used to go meet sir. He'll be operating all his free flaps. So that is the time I've understood one word, which is called as scientific surgeon. How can a surgeon be a scientist come surgeon? So, so that the word came to me through Vikram sir. So I welcome you, sir. The session is over to you.
Thank you so much for your kind words. It's really a pleasure to meet you a bit online. I miss those days when we used to meet more frequently when you were in Bangalore. And thank you HCG team for this opportunity to interact. You guys are really doing amazing work by organizing so much of academic fees during these difficult times. So I think it's a time well utilized for everyone. Many of us may not be able to join online, but it's always good to look at this online stuff later. And this is a kind of resource which is generated for future. So congratulations, Dr. Shalini and your team. So Vishal and Akshay, all of them, you guys are doing a great job. So uh, today I have been asked to speak about rehabilitation following maxillary and mandibular reconstruction. So let me just start sharing my screen. At first, I was a bit surprised. How am I going to talk about rehabilitation, particularly very specific topic, saying that I must talk about the rehabilitation. So it's always good. It made me also look into our previous data and also read the some catch up with the literature also. So what I'm going to do today is basically an oncology perspective. I'm not going to venture too much into the maxillofacial or prosthodontic territory, but how a oncological or a reconstructive surgeon should approach the rehabilitation right from the day he sees the patient in the clinic to surgery to post-op period to eventual rehabilitation of these defects, and what we have learned so far and how uh, the future lies. So we all know that when we do maxillary reconstruction or a mandibular reconstruction, our primary goal is to protect the airway. And along with the airway, all the vital structure, particularly the important blood vessels and the carotid artery and orocutaneous fistula. At the same time, we need to work around for swallowing, speech, osmosis, dentition, mastication, quality of life. So typically, the top three were always our priority. We were all worried about the airway. We were all worried about whether patient is going to swallow, whether there's going to be aspiration, speech to certain extent. But the bottom four, we were really not concerned over years. We never thought about quality of life, the dentition, mastication, all came way down in the list of priority because the oncological care took always the precedence. But I think there is a need to now kind of look at these goals in a more comprehensive way and not to push quality of life or the dentition way down in the list, but it should be a integral part of the whole oncological care. Now, if you look at, andigum deformity or patient coming with exposed plate, all these things we continue to see. Although, on one side, we have achieved excellence in terms of dental rehabilitation, implant-based fibular flaps-based rehabilitation, and we can achieve a very, very good functional and cosmetic outcome. But still, we continue to look at our patients who come with deformed faces and with a lot of functional morbidity in terms of speech and swallowing. So we should look at the transformation which can be achieved by application of reconstruction and rehabilitative techniques. So, what is the oncologist perspective? See, when we talk or see somebody speak at a big conference about fantastic results being achieved in implants and reconstruction, most of these things we need to understand are in a benign condition. So the results are naturally going to be, much better. But what we are going to talk today is mostly from an oral cancer perspective. Now, first and foremost here is that whenever we deal with the oral cancer, it is not the only bony defect. Most of it is soft tissue uh, loss along with the bony defect, which is more important. If we think in terms of our Indian cancer, if it is a gingival cancer, majority of the defect is soft tissue, which goes on to involve the bone secondarily. So the primary defect is soft tissue. So naturally, these are far more composite defects than typically we see with a good functional outcome, which are bony defect associated with certain conditions like ameloblastoma or OKC. Always, oncological treatment should take precedence. There is a lot of alteration of tissue vascularity and architecture, both due to surgery as well as with the radiation. So that needs to be taken into due consideration when you are planning for any rehabilitation. There is always a timing issue, whether you do this as a primary during your oncological procedure or you plan it at a later time point. Mainly because if you are resecting mandible or maxilla, that by definition becomes a stage 4 disease, and it has it's a limited oncological outcome also. So that also needs to be taken into perspective because there is always an additional cost and multiple procedures which are required. Now, I was talking about quality of life, and we have always, never thought about quality of life. So, to start this talk with a correct perspective, the question was asked whether, dental rehabilitation, whether it does improve quality of life in oral cancer patient or not. Dr. Vinay did this study here in Bangalore, and he compared the quality of life in patients who received dental implants. Um, and there was no doubt that people who received dental implant definitely had a better quality of life. So the basic premise remains that whenever possible, we should have a dental both maxillary and mandibular dentition rehabilitation done, and it definitely improves the quality of life of patient. So if we look at, as I was mentioning, the primary tumors of affecting the mandible or maxilla are primarily small. These are basically the surrounding tumors arising from the floor, tongue, or buccal mucosa, which goes on to involve the mandible or the maxilla, and that's how mandibular or maxillary defect is created. So when we are planning for any of this reconstruction, see, there is lot of soft tissue involvement, which is far more important compared to the bony involvement per se. So conventionally, when we were looking at the mandibular defect, we understand that there are two basic differences. There is marginal defect, where there is the continuity of the mandible is not affected, and the segmental defect, where there is a continuity of the mandible is also affected. Now, if you look at when the segmental mandible, in case of segmental mandible, whenever there is the arch of the mandible or the anterior defect, which is in what, it is important to do a bony reconstruction of this defect, primarily because it is important to support the tongue musculature to prevent the tongue fall and avoid any compromising the airway. So that's why in anterior defect, bony reconstruction is mandatory. Otherwise, patients land up with anti-gum deformity. So typically for anterior defect, we have array of flaps, but by and large, most of us would use a fibular flap. And if it is associated with a substantial soft tissue defect, then you may have to use a double free flap, because all of us understand that fibula provides very limited soft tissue along the bone. Although the bone quality is good, a long bone can be harvested, but the availability of the soft tissue is less. So if your soft tissue defect is large, then a double free flap can be used. When in the lateral defect, which we conventionally has been called as the commando procedure or the bite resection, typically has been reconstructed with soft tissue alone flap, primarily because not availability of the microvascular uh, flaps, also because the requirement of soft tissue in the lateral defect is less. Nevertheless, the first choice of even for the lateral defect should be a bony flap. While in the marginal, it is primarily a lining defect. So your continuity of the bone is maintained. So you can line up the defect with variety of the soft tissue flap available, but more or less radial forearm flap is the flap of the choice in the marginal defect. So when this is a typical defect we see in all of our practice every day, a large buccal mucosa defect with the mandible, with the infratemporal fossa, and a large soft tissue loss. So whether the choice is between a adequate soft tissue reconstruction or or a bony reconstruction, the soft tissue reconstruction should get more prominence, because in a condition of inadequate soft tissue reconstruction, the patient may land up in trismus. There will be wound breakdowns, which will lead to treatment delays and poor oncological outcome. Once the trismus sets in, there is no benefit even if you have planned for a dental implantation. The rehabilitation process may not be possible. So first and foremost thing is to achieve a good soft tissue reconstruction. Now, this is a typical example where you have a large soft tissue defect and just a simple um, soft tissue reconstruction has been done. And we looked at some of our data where soft tissue alone of such complex defect using either ALT flap or PMMC flap. Two more important, most important parameters. How is the feeding and how is the post-operative trismus? And very important to note that majority of patients are on the soft iron and oral, the post-operative trismus is not seen if there is a adequate soft tissue reconstruction done. So the first principle of good rehabilitation is never compromise on soft tissue reconstruction, right? So that's the first principle of rehabilitation. But there are a lot of issues when you are considering only soft tissue reconstruction. Jaw deviation. There is no hard bite. Mastication function is grossly affected. Speech quality is inferior. Patient experienced the temporal mandibular joint on the opposite side, lot of pain because of the deviation and definitely a lower quality of life. Hence, bony reconstruction is recommended. Now, when fibular flap became common about 2 decades back, people were just happy just putting a fibula in position and achieving the bony continuity. But as we soon realized that it is just not about putting the flap or achieving the bony continuity. It is all important whether your condyle is in position, whether your occlusion is in place, and all these things come into play. It is just not about putting a simple bony reconstruction. So how do you do that? One of the simple method where the tumor allows is just by doing a pre-plating of the mandible before you cut the bone. So in that way, the mandibular position is achieved even before the discontinuity is established. So here is the plate on the native mandible, and once the plating is done, then the bone is cut so that your mandibular segment don't move. We must remember that the muscle of mastication are quite powerful muscles. So once the mandible is cut, then the muscle pull is in different direction, and it is quite difficult to get the proper occlusion and proper shape, proper continuity. So it is important to have a good pre-adapted plate. The next thing is in situation when the pre-adapting over the mandible is not possible. Now we have a lot of technology available where you can mirror image the mandible and the plate can be pre-adapted to achieve the mandibular contour as well as to achieve good occlusion. Now this was all fine, you could get the bone in position, but as the field moved, we wanted to learn furthermore. Dr. Vijay Pilla from NH, he had published this paper that it is not about getting the bone in position. It is where do you put the bone is very important for eventual rehabilitation. And he did a very smart thing to measure um, the, dis- the interalveolar distance and the horizontal relationship. So if you look at the mandible in a horizontal plane, there is a difference between the alveolar surface and the lower border. So when we tend to put the fibula bone at the lower border, it may not form the correct occlusal plane. And that was an important thing in terms of planning the and rehabilitation. It gave an anatomical basis to plan for rehabilitation. So just to, in a diagrammatic way, this is the lower border of the mandible and this is the occlusal surface. So if you put the bone here, your dental rehabilitation is perfect. But if the bone is here, then your implant is away from the occlusal surface. And this may not result into a perfect rehabilitation. So this simple day-to-day anatomical basis is very important to in planning the where your implant should be placed. Now we have all sort of CAD/CAM planning software available, multiple software available with varying cost. They provide us all the information once we submit the imaging thing, and include and the entire plan where the bone should be cut, where the implant should be put. All the planning can be easily made available. Also, cutting guides can be made available, and where which guides us exactly where on the fibula bone the cut should be, what should be the angulation, and so that the implant placement eventually comes into a correct position. So we have lot of technology support these days to plan a good rehabilitation for our patient, and the results are now obvious. Now this is a patient with a almost total jaw replacement. Now you see the angle to angle defect here and the fibula, and the implant placement planned according to the CAD/CAM software base, and you get a perfect occlusion and a good rehabilitation in, even in such large segment defect. Now, it is not all that simple that you get the CAD/CAM planning done and you get the cutting guides and you can just plate implant. As we learn more and more about this, we need to plan in a three-dimensional thing. So even when you have a cutting guides and other things, there can still be change in the axis of the implant. So we should remember that the implant placement is a three-dimensional process. So even if you get your bone right, even if you get the height of the bone right, you can still put the implant in a wrong angle or a wrong plane, and that would again compromise your eventual rehabilitation. So we talked about the occlusion, we talked about getting the condyle in position, then we talked about the importance of getting the bone in the right position, then we talked about getting the bone in the right position of the occlusal plane, and now we are talking about the right angle of the implant. So just to reiterate that there are multiple dimensions of this rehabilitation which we need to consider, and as more and more data is made available, we are learning more and more about it. So one of the things which is being proposed was to have we published some time back was a Jugaad technique. This was a basically to have a intraoperative splint which will act as a guide, both to make sure that your fibula is in correct position as well as your implants are correctly aligned to an opposite jaw. So if you are doing a mandibular reconstruction, you align the splint according to the maxillary dentition, or other way around. If you are doing for maxilla, you can always align it to the mandibular dentition. And what happens with this, the splint intraoperatively, you have the upper dentition, you have the splint in place, you get the fibula, and then using the splint as a guide, you put the implants at a proper location, and that gives a correct position for implant. So typically Jugaad technique can be used where in a low resource setting where CAD/CAM planning may not be possible. Even in with the CAD/CAM planning, if we have an intraoperative splint, it may further augment our ability to put the implants in the right position. This technique can be further extrapolated for secondary rehabilitation. Now remember, secondary rehabilitation is even more challenging in a way, because now we are dealing with lot of soft tissue contractures. The condyle may not be in position, and the muscles of mastication may be have gone into fibrosis. Most of these patients come with post-operative radiation therapy. So the native tissue may not be receptive. So all those things can go should be considered when you are planning secondary rehabilitation. So in secondary rehabilitation, importance should be given to the soft tissue as well as to the bony thing as we plan for the secondary rehabilitation. So this is a typical thing when you put a fibula flap up and an implant base, a secondary reconstruction is also possible. You might note here that the tissue, native tissue quality here was far superior to achieve this, but it may not be possible in many other patients where there is lot of post-RT contracture. So proper case selection would lead to a very important in a successful rehabilitation. Now it doesn't end there. Now just putting a fibula and getting it in the right position is just the first step. Now if you look at this picture, there is no sulcus. Even though the fibula is in position and the skin paddle is healed, there is no sulcus formation where your dental rehabilitation can be done. So fibula, if you look at here, fibula bone, and this is the skin paddle. There is lot of subcutaneous soft tissue, subcutaneous fat here, and that kind of obliterates the sulcus, and also the contact between the opposing tooth and the implant is hampered because of plenty of soft tissue. So before starting the rehabilitation, we need to take care of this so that the implant can be either placed secondarily, or if it is already placed, it can be exposed, and a rehabilitation can be planned. Now what you can do, you can, more variety of techniques can be achieved, and this has to be more or less exactly according to the requirement from patient to patient. Now some patients, if you see in our practice, have lot of uh, fat in their fibular skin paddle. Some patient, it is very thin and it is well adapted to form the sulcus. So in some patients there is a plenty of fat, so you need to debulk the fat. In some patient, the entire skin paddle has to be removed and bone exposed so that the epithelial element are settled and the implants exposed. So eventually your bed should look something like that, well epithelialized with a tight tissue sitting there. It is not a mobile tissue, and the implant exposed, so that there is a um, good connect between the eventual prosthesis, and also multiple issues related to implant, which due to the mobility of the soft tissue around the implants can be avoided if you have a tight epithelial tissue which is quite adherent to the fibular bone. So these are a few important technical tips which will help you in improving the functional rehabilitation. Now, looking at the maxillectomy defect, see, whenever we are planning for a maxillectomy reconstruction, I like to use the James Brown classification because it gives the defect into two components, the vertical component as well as a horizontal component. Now, horizontal component kind of helps you to determine how much extent of the uh, defect is going to cross over to the other side. See, whenever the premaxilla is involved or has to be resected, then in those cases, you need to replace by a bone. Otherwise, there is a premaxillary collapse leading to severe functional as well as cosmetic defect. Earlier in our practice, whenever there was a small defect involving the lateral infrastructural maxilla, a soft tissue reconstruction was a treatment of choice. But now, more and more of our patients are actually demanding a bony reconstruction. So even for a small lateralized defect of the maxilla, a bony reconstruction should be considered. But in a large defect like this, which involves entire palate and possibly skull base, orbit, these defects would probably warrant two flaps, one to fill in the soft tissue and other to provide a bony support. Now, I'm not going to go into details of the prosthetic rehabilitation, which we have been using for quite some many years, and we have plenty of wonderful prosthodontic colleagues who support us in providing partial denture, complete dentures, obturators, and most of us have used them for variety of maxillary defect. But let's look at what we can do with the bony reconstruction or microvascular reconstruction. Now, maxilla has certain advantages as well as disadvantages. As I said, in mandible, we have a condyle which acts as a reference. We have a mandibular continuity. We have occlusion. All we can use as a guide to kind of put the bone in perfect position. But if you look at maxilla, we don't have that guide. If the posterior alveolus or the maxilla is attached to the pterygoid plates, and when you resect the maxilla, you cannot practically plate the fibula bone to pterygoid plates. So now sometimes your maxilla reconstructed bone goes up and it is of no use for dental rehabilitation. Sometimes it comes too down and again it is not too good for. So in that way, the mid-face reconstruction can be challenging. But the advantage is it's a non-weight bearing. So in that way, unlike mandible leading to the fracture of plates and plate-related complication, maxilla can be a little forgiving since it is not a weight-bearing thing. So you can play around with variety of permutation and combination here. But here also, the CAD-CAM planning and getting the intraoperative splint really helps to put the bone into correct position. Another advantage in maxilla is you can augment your fibular flap and support your dentition with maxillary implants. So that is another added in. So this is a typical total maxillectomy defect. You have a fibular flap sitting there. Some part of the fibular flap is not strong enough to hold a reconstruction. So on one side, the maxillary implant, the zygomatic implants are being used to support the dentition. So this is something what you can achieve a complete maxillary reconstruction using both CAD-CAM planning, intraop splint, and zygomatic implants also. Now, as an oncologist, we are always worried about what is the overall outcome. Now, overall outcome of this is directly proportional to, experience the reconstructive team and the resection team has in handling such cases. If the overall survival of fibular flap is high, then that is a prerequisite for starting all this implant based rehabilitation. If your primary flap survival of the unit is not good, then we are going to face a lot of challenge. This is a review article published recently in Head and Neck Journal where they say that 5 years implant survival in a appropriately selected patients is up to 94%. This is about the fibular flaps. Uh, and in the analysis, they found that radiation more than 50 gray is definitely an adverse factor. And that is a concern when we are talking in terms of oncological patient. Now, that brings us to a question, when do you put the implants? Primary implants at the time of your oncological resection and reconstruction, or secondary implant after 6 months to 1 year when the oncological treatment is complete? As I mentioned, this is a function of how experienced the unit is. If your fibular flap or the bony reconstruction survival rate of these flaps is very high, then primary implant should be preferred because of the simple reason that you can do entire planning before the radiation and in a native tissue setting. And once the implants are placed and buried, you can undertake the radiation treatment without any problem. And by the time 6-8 months later, when the oncological treatment is over and the side effects are done, the implants are well integrated, and those can be uh, uh, then loaded for dental rehabilitation. Second important thing about the secondary is to choose the time. We all know radiation will have a varied degree of response to different individuals. Some people have lot of scarring of tissue, some people have less of it. In that way, the secondary rehabilitation, the call has to be done based on the quality of the native tissue, and it might be delayed by 6 months to 1 year depending. Also, since you are going to operate into a radiated field, the risk of radionecrosis into fibular bone exposure and loss of implant is theoretically less, but we don't have any randomized study to compare this. Some of our early experience show that typically the radiotherapy per se does not affect the implant if they are properly placed and the vascularity of the fibula is good. Then radiotherapy is not a contraindicator. You can radiate the thing. Now the problem comes when you operate into a radiated field and the soft tissue coverage is not good. In those cases, when the soft tissue coverage over the fibula is not done, and in such cases when you do over enthusiastically the fibular implants, then the chances of losing the implants are very high. Like case in point here, it's a large segment of fibula here. The part of the fibula here was well covered with the soft tissue, but there was a loss of skin paddle here, and you see the fibular bone here is not in a good condition, and there is loosening of implants here. So primarily it's a soft tissue function. Since the soft tissue was not good, you had the loss of the bone and then loss of the implant. So case selection in oncological scenario remains very critical. In the interest of time, I would not go into the details of which implants to be used, but I think in general, the tissue level implants are fairly well studied and being commonly used. Now, what is the way forward? Sometime back, there was this very interesting concept of uh, ectopic bone generation using stem cells, and multiple studies came out where they could use stem cell and generate ectopic bone somewhere in a distant part of the body, and then the vascular tissue was then moved to the reconstruction field, and even the dental implants could be put in the ectopic bone. But one of the challenge with this technique in oncologic setup is for the ectopic bone to grow, there is a requirement of lot of bone growth promoting factors, and their effect in oncological setting can be very disastrous. Also, in oncological setup, we are limited by time restriction. We need to start radiation post surgery within a month or 6 weeks at the most. So the bone has to regenerate within that time. So both these things, the use of growth factors like BMP and the time restriction or the time required for the bone to grow is causing lot of limitation for using this technique in oncological setup. But there are quite interesting development, particularly using the nanoparticle based approach, where they can um, kind of replace the growth factors so that they can be safely used in the oncological setup. But it's work in progress, quite an interesting thing. If we can generate ectopic bone and fashion it according to our requirement, that would be an ideal world situation. But this is a teamwork. There need to be a constant dialogue between the reconstruction surgeon, the resecting surgeon, the maxillofacial surgeon, prosthodontics, and now scientists also. So they have to be part of our rehabilitation team who would kind of work closely to look for the best possible solution. So to summarize, friends, now anatomical basis is the real thing to be considered to get your occlusion right, to put the bone in the right position, to put the implants in the right position. So anatomical basis is the key. Now we have variety of planning techniques right from sophisticated CAD/CAM technology to a simple Jugaad technique. Implants, primary implants can be safely used even in the radiation setup, provided the soft tissue is good and your fibula or whatever bony flap you have used, the vascularity is good. Now, the rehabilitation of following mandibular or maxillary reconstruction definitely improves surgery and definitely is something we will have to offer to our patient in time to come. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you, sir. Excellent presentation, sir. Sir, here there are a few questions. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, you are.
So the first question is, sir, in case of maxillary defects, which involves the removal of floor of the orbit, in that situation, other than fibula, what are the reconstructive options you prefer? If fibula is not the choice for maxilla defect, for the floor defect.
Right. So the question is for the orbital defect, basically. So
Yes,
one of the important thing to consider here is that the fibula reconstruction is mainly to give contour to the orbital rim, which is cosmetically debilitating. But we need to look at the orbit in totality, in a way that the orbital rim forms only a small part. If you have an entire floor defect, and particularly if it is extending high up to the Whitnell's tubercle laterally, then there is lot of sagging of the orbital content. So putting only fibula is not an option there. So in that case, the orbital content needs to be supported by one of the mesh thing. Now, one of the question always comes is, can you just put a titanium mesh or a Prolene mesh there and bury it in a soft tissue flap? So in general, that is not a good option in an oncological setting where you are going to follow it up with a radiotherapy, because most of these mesh tend to come out during radiation. So in general, two options. If you have to use titanium mesh, then you need to bury it in your vascularized soft tissue flap like ALT or rectus, whatever you are using. But to give the orbital prominence, the bony reconstruction is always required. And bottom line is, whatever is your reconstruction, it needs to be vascular. That is more important. Otherwise, your mesh will all come out.
okay, sir. Sir, all you have answered this question previously in your talk, sir. They have multiple times. People have asked about the timing of implant placement intraoperatively, whether to place the implant intraoperatively in the after securing the plates, or to put it in during the when you place the guide templates, cutting guides, or when to place after surgery, after radiation, or during the surgery.
So two parts of this question. One is that intraoperatively, when do you put, whether you just put it when you are harvesting the fibula or when you have already cut the fibula and put it intraorally. See, my preference is to put it once you have insert the fibula in the oral cavity, because when you are dealing with oncological cases, there is always definitely some amount of alteration which might be required intraoperatively uh, uh, than your planning stage, because that's the nature of oncological surgery. Things change from day to day basis. Your exact planning works when you are doing it for a benign condition, where you wherever you do it does not matter. So I would much rather do it once the fibula is inset, use a intraoperative splint, and then use that as a guide to put the implants, and that has worked best for us. Regarding the primary versus secondary, I think I spoke about it. My choice again remains primary implants for the reason I mentioned, because by the time you complete your treatment in 6 to 8 months, the implants are integrated and ready for loading. Other the caveat here being that your fibula should be healthy. At no point you can afford to lose a fibula flap along with the implants. So the unit should be well tuned to managing fibular flaps or any microvascular flap.
So the next question is on 3D printed implant based processes. Your opinion?
What is it?
Sir, usually place implants on fibula, isn't it, sir?
Yeah.
Instead, there are the recently we have 3D printed implants. Along with the implants, they have projections for the implants, dental implants. Along with the plate, there will be projections, sir, not a
Right.
separate implant. So they wanted to know your opinion on that.
So I have personally not used it, but one of the key thing for an oncological reconstruction is to have a vascularized bone there. If your bone is not vascularized there, whatever metal you put in whatever form, it is going to come out. Now, once you have a vascularized bone in place, then you can play around it in any way. There is no problem, and I'm sure lot of innovations will come. But if you don't have a good bone there, which is vascularized, and you give radiation, in due course, it will all come out.
Okay, sir. Sir, one more question. How to incorporate implant charges for patients with insurance and schemes?
I think that's a very interesting question. So I think the only way is by doing more people doing so. As more and more people centers start doing these oncological implants on regular basis, I think the insurance companies will have to be tuned to doing that. But as I mentioned in my talk about the maxillary reconstruction, there are more and more people also asking for implants, even for maxilla, which typically we would have done with a soft tissue flap. So I think it's a evolving situation, and in time to come, there will definitely most of these issues will get sorted out.
Okay, sir. Sir, the other question is, if double barrel techniques is not possible, what are the options for maintaining the lower border integrity and implant rehabilitation?
Right, that's a very good question. See, personally, I have never been a fan of double barreling. If you look at most of the pictures I showed, it is all single barrel. See, one of the thing is, if you kind of fold the fibula, then the vascularity of the segment which comes in the occlusal plane is sometimes compromised, not always, if it is not placed properly. So I would much rather adapt the plate slightly higher, so that um, only one single segment. So it is perfectly fine if you adapt it a few millimeters higher, but that does not actually give you a step deformity, because mandible is well draped, or the fibula is well draped in the soft tissue. But at the same time, it gives you a sufficient height where your dental implant can be in a occlusal plane of rehab.
Okay, thank you, sir. So the other question is, the plastic surgeons fear placing implants due to chances of osseointegration. And Is that question, Shalini?
Osteonecrosis, sir.
Sorry,
Osteocrosis.
osteonecrosis.
I don't, that question would have been more relevant about 5-10 years back when we started doing that. That was a real concern whether, the implant related complication, whether it is necrosis or infection, would that lead to loss of fibular flap? And that was a genuine concern. So, but now we have enough literature out there where primarily if your fibular flap is healthy, then implants are not the one which are going to cause the problem. So fundamental thing is you should have your fibula which is healthy. If the vascularity of the fibula is compromised, then the whole structure is compromised, and then it is easy to put the blame on the implant.
Okay, sir. Dr. Shalini, anything else to be asked?
No, sir. I think you covered all the bases.
I think there's an important question I see about the
Yes, sir.
radiation scatter. Simple answer is no. If we use the standard implants, we have not seen any radiation scatter. So just go ahead with the radiation. Absolutely no problem.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. I think you've covered all the bases, and thank you, Dr. L.M. Kumaran. I think
Thank you, Shalini.
you've made sure that the session was interactive. The one thing that makes this topic very important for all of us, who've just started our practice in head and neck surgery, is that nowadays the patients demand that their dental rehabilitation be taken care of at the time of addressal of the primary tumor itself. So in our training and in a lot of centers, even now in India, this is not given as much importance, like you mentioned, sir, in your presentation. So I think now in the coming days, more and more studies, and I think a lot of research has to be done on this, so that there is a definitive answer and a definitive way in which we can even deal with it in our clinical practice as well. Thank you so much, sir, for giving us so much. I mean, I think there were one or two very critical take-home points over there. One about the fear of radiation, the second about how we can maintain lower border integrity while stepping up the one segment of the fibula to give a good dental rehabilitation as well. Thank you so much, sir. I mean, it was a really an enlightening experience for all of us. Thank you, Dr. L.M. Kumaran, for joining us and helping us out today. And thank you. I would also like to thank my team, beginning with my senior colleagues, Dr. Vishal Rao, Dr. Ravi Nair, and Dr. Akshay Kurpaje, who were whom this idea of utilizing the COVID-19 times, in a better manner first came from. Thank you, Dr. Anand, Dr. Bhargav, and all our fellows, Dr. Ritvi, for the kind support that you all have been giving us. And it's been possible only because of the work of everybody involved. Thank you for joining us. And please join us for next week's webinars as well. We are going to have two webinars, one of NACT and one of ITF clearance. So please join us for that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Shalini.
Thank you. Thank you.